Chapter 11. Mrs. Midas was very upset when Mr. Midas told her that John had Dr. Cranium's disease. He said it was called chocolate-itis, Mr. Midas explained. A worried frown was on his face. But he's calling it Cranium's disease because it was his discovery. Dr. Cranium didn't do it, John said. It's magic. It all started after I ate the chocolate. And I'm scared, he added. Mrs. Midas sat down and dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was crying. Mr. Midas blew his nose and said he had to attend to something and abruptly left the room. John had been so busy feeling sorry for himself that he had not realized how his mother and father would feel about his chocolate disease. Never mind, Mother, he said, putting his arm around her shoulders. It's all right, really. There is a mosquito in here. Really, nothing was all right, but he couldn't bear to see his mother's tears. He kissed her wet cheek. His eyes were shut as his lips softly touched her, so he didn't see the change right away. Then he began to feel his lips, and they were sticky. He opened his eyes, and his mother had turned into a lifeless statue of chocolate, all because he kissed her. John ran wildly out of the house without thinking where he was going or what he was going to do. All he knew was that somehow he must get help. For the first time in a long time, he forgot about himself altogether. Now he didn't care about anything but bringing his mother back to life. Without quite knowing how to get there, John found himself at the corner where he had bought the chocolate box. There was no longer an untidy rubbish dump. The neat red brick building with 2 windows was exactly where it had been in the first place. But the display of candy he had previously seen in the windows was no longer there. In one window, John saw a chocolate trumpet, a chocolate pencil, and a silver dollar with a piece bitten out of it. Wait a second. A chocolate pencil, a silver dollar with a piece bitten out of it, and a chocolate trumpet. Aren't those all the things that John turned to chocolate today? In the other window, he saw a cafeteria tray littered with chocolate utensils and the remains of a chocolate lunch. Oh my goodness, this is definitely what John turned to chocolate. Clearly, this was the right place to be. The proprietor must know a lot about John's hateful chocolate touch. John rushed into the store. The proprietor was standing behind the counter, carefully polishing something small and round and flat and silver. I was just thinking of you, he said. John had no time to waste on pleasantries. Remember the old coin I found and I gave you and you gave me the magic chocolate? He demanded, without waiting for a reply. I ate it and it made everything that touched my mouth turn to chocolate and I kissed my mother and now she's chocolate and I've got to change her back. Easy now, murmured the shopkeeper. Calm yourself. There was an expression of satisfaction in the old man's eyes. It's all your fault, John declared. If my mother isn't made better again, I'll bite you till you're dead. My goodness, the storekeeper explained. Whose fault did you say it was? Yours, John said. If you hadn't taken that money, I wouldn't have. Now, John, the storekeeper interrupted, I must insist on honesty. I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about your mother for a change. Unselfishness is important, but honesty is also important. If you'll be truthful, perhaps I can help you. John's ears turned red. It was becoming unmistakably evident to him that he had only himself to blame for all of his unhappiness. He looked straight into the storekeeper's eyes. I'll do anything. I'll work for you all my life. So there's John yelling at the shopkeeper. There's his trumpet. There's the something silver the man is polishing. I'll work for you for nothing. If you turn my mother back, please just turn my mother back. You can turn me into chocolate instead if you want. The storekeeper apparently ignored John's offers. You were right, John, he said, when you guessed that I had something to do with you acquiring the chocolate touch. But you yourself earned the coin that bought the chocolate touch. Only greedy people can see that kind of money. Dr. Cranium was right, up to a point, I suppose, that one could say you did have chocolate-itis, but it was just an outward sign of your selfishness. My mother, John reminded the storekeeper frantically. My mother turned into chocolate. Please do something about it. Oh, please do something about it. I'm glad that you're concerned, the storekeeper commented unhurriedly. Part of your cure is to be concerned about other people. You have been so greedy that you didn't care what happened to other people. Oh, I know, John admitted woefully, but please decide about me later and make my mother better now. Well, John, the storekeeper said, if you had to choose between getting rid of your chocolate touch and restoring your mother to life, what would it be? For one moment, John couldn't help imagining a future of all chocolate meals. The thought was terrible, but then he thought of his mother as she had been when he left her, a motionless chocolate statue, unable to speak. Her chocolate hands was still holding onto her lace handkerchief. Without further hesitation, John said, "Help my mother." "Well, John," the storekeeper said, "I'm going to give you another chance. When you when you next go to school, your chocolate pencil will be a real wooden pencil with lead inside." "But," John began to protest, "what did the pencil matter?" "The chocolate knife and fork and spoon you left on your tray in the cafeteria will turn back into metal. Your chocolate trumpet will be shiny and golden once again." "But," John said, "don't worry about Dr. Cranium's spoon. He'll find a whole silver one on the floor where the broken chocolate one used to be." "But how about," John said, "Susan Buttercup will discover that her chocolate stains on her party dress and her party shoes were nothing but water after all. Her silver dollar will be all right." John could stand the suspense no longer. "My mother!" he shouted. "What about my mother? Will she be all right?" The storekeeper smiled. "Why don't you run along home and find out?" he suggested. John turned without even saying goodbye and ran out of the store. The storekeeper went back to the disc that he had been polishing, a disc the size of a quarter. It had to be polished smooth, ready for a new set of initials in case the need of them for a greedy child should arise.